Around the time of my birthday, I got heavily into super girly stuff, super girly fashion and media, and things like that. And I made a remark to my boyfriend that I was losing my edge. Previously, I had almost exclusively been inspired by goth and emo, and I was into Riot Girl. And then he texted me something that has lived in my mind rent-free ever since. Girly stuff is inherently counterculture under patriarchy. Hi, welcome to my TED Talk. Hyperfemininity is defined as an exaggerated adherence to the stereotypic feminine gender performance, expression, and style. Visually, hyperfemininity is characterized by its exaggeration and amplification of traditionally feminine style, but it is not directly related to one specific portrayal and can be adopted into a multitude of aesthetics. Think that one viral Selkie dress, drag queens, Bridgerton, cottagecore, Barbiecore, Bimbo Summit, Lolita, not that one, this one, Mean Girls, etc. Hyperfemininity is something that exists in multiple subcultures and groups, and I was able to interview someone who is a member of a couple hyperfeminine subcultures, which you'll see in a minute. I want to start off by talking a little bit about your personal style.
Yeah, I became interested in, I guess, just fashion in general when I was about 6 years old. I played the game Style Savvy on my DS, which I got for Christmas. And, that game has Lolita and Decora and a lot of alternative styles. So I was really interested in that, but I didn't know that those existed in real life. So fast forward to when I'm 14, I find a random Princess Peachy video on YouTube, and that's where I found Lolita and Fairy K. And so it's been about 6 or 7 years, and I have been a lifestyle Fairy K ever since, and I've been doing Lolita also.
My puppy is sleeping next to me.
Hi! Hello!
He's Teddy. He rocks with the hyper feminine everything. He's
not a lot of dogs do. They don't like people wearing hats a lot or big petticoats. I find I've been attacked by a dog because they didn't like my outfit.
Bigoted dog.
No, I personally identify as hyper feminine, but it is a label I have struggled with. Because it's not really one set thing. So as a kid, I kind of struggled with my femininity. I was very feminine on the inside. I would show up to school in a dress, and I have this specific memory of being at school, feeling really pretty in my dress, and then the students in my class would be like, "Why are you wearing that?" And so to me, femininity is to subverse that sort of societal expectation that being feminine is too much. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna make it too much so that you're get used to it, I don't know. So that's how it is for me.
Amazing. And then that goes perfectly into the next question. Do you think hyperfemininity can be a form of resistance?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So in Lolita fashion and Fairy K fashion, a lot of the sort of rebellion aspect is not letting go of your childhood. And so a lot of children's toys are obviously very gendered. As a kid, I loved Pokemon, I loved Barbie, I liked, a mix of things, but I was really embarrassed about my feminine interests. And so, as I grew up, I realized, hey, it's not bad to have those interests, and I should just embrace it. And now, obviously, I kind of just fill my entire life with anything cutesy, to be it doesn't matter how old I am, what gender I am, how I present. I like these things, and I'm gonna have these things if I want them.
Mm-hmm. This is punk to me. That is the case that I'm making.
I agree. Kawaii is very punk.
Yes, kawaii is so.
My friend actually, I sew and customize clothes a lot, and so my punk friend was actually telling me, like, your style of fairy K is very reminiscent of punk fashion. Like, you kind of have your own version of crest pants and all that. Like, I just cover my jeans in like patches, ribbons, sparkles. It's just like a very feminine version of punk, sort of.
Do you view your personal style as a form of resistance?
Yeah, not only because it looks different, but because it takes up a lot of space physically. So you have to learn, especially if you're wearing petticoats or big hats or whatever, or big bows, you have to learn to not only be okay with people seeing you, but people like being physically next to you. And you have to be okay with, you know, making people slightly uncomfortable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, not making yourself smaller, but instead making yourself larger.
Yes, like, so going back to the hyperfemininity, that is a hard word, hyperfemininity aspect. A lot of people view women as small and like weak, but physically taking up more space with your clothing is kind of like taking that back and being like, I can take up space, I'm valid, I should be here.
Hell yeah. I set this up with like random stuff around my house.
That's cute.
Yeah, I was like,
that plushie up there.
Yeah. This is like a little Easter bunny Hello Kitty that my friend gave me, because I have my little like collection of hyperfeminine stuff, and I just she's on the wall. Oh my gosh.
Same as my tattoo.
Heck yeah. All right, well, that's all of the questions that I had for you, and this ended up being like the most fruitful like 5 minutes.
Oh good, I'm glad.
Like you nail it every time. It's like, yes, this is the point I'm trying to make. Thank you.
Good, thank you, because I have been doing this for 7 years, so I've thought about it a lot, like why I'm doing it, why I like it, like is there anything wrong with it? I've agonized over all of it, so I know what to say now.
Yes, and it is incredibly helpful, so thank you.
I'm really glad. Yeah, it was nice to meet you.
Hell yeah, it was nice to meet you too. I hadn't previously considered just how many groups fit into the criteria of hyperfemininity. Originally, I was going to make this video solely focused on Lolita, the Japanese fashion subculture. It's frilly, doll-like, and entirely focused on the enjoyment of the wearer instead of the enjoyment of the observer. But hyperfemininity as resistance seems to exist widely, or at least I see it that way. Drag queens, for example, are hyperfeminine in such a subversive way that I think it would be reductive to not describe them as resistant to a bigoted dominant culture. But think of all of the examples of hyperfemininity that I just showed you. What goes through your mind when you see them? How are people who fit this description often portrayed? Let's take the example of Mean Girls. Mean Girls is just one of the many examples of hyperfemininity being demonized in the media. Girly girls are not usually protagonists that we are meant to like. They tend to be the mean girls. I could not revise that out of this script to save my life. It just is what it is. This trope exists in many movies. There's a trope of the protagonist girl who's a bit more tomboyish in the sense that she does not don so much pink, nor care so much about fashion or her appearance, and she's viewed, or meant to be viewed, as relatable and sensible by the audience. Her rival, however, is usually a hyperfeminine girl who does care about her appearance and often does wear a lot of the color pink, and we are supposed to see her as vapid and selfish. But is this sexism? Both of the characters that I just mentioned were girls, and drag queens famously tend to identify as men outside of their performances, so what exactly is going on here? Femphobia! Woohoo! Femphobia, yay! New form of bigotry just dropped. Woohoo! According to Rhea Ashley Hoskin in her paper Femininity, it's the aesthetic of subordination, examining femphobia, the gender binary, and experiences of oppression among sexual and gender minorities. Femphobia refers to the devaluation and regulation of femininity. And to quote Julia Serrano, a transgender woman who wrote a book called Whipping Girl, in her essay Barrett Manifesto, "Don't be fooled by thick-necked macho men who pretend that girl stuff is boring or frivolous, because that's just an act. Because as soon as you ask that guy to hold your purse for a minute, he will start to squirm, as if your handbag were full of worms, as he holds it as far away from his rugged body as possible. Feminists have made it okay for girls to explore what used to be an exclusively boy world, but true equality won't come until boys learn to embrace girl stuff as well. It's about the fear of being seen as feminine, and that's why girl stuff is so dangerous." I kind of always had an understanding of the concept of femphobia and how femininity can be rebellious against it before I even knew that it actually had a name. I always tried to explain very clumsily to my incredibly well-educated peers that watching and enjoying the Twilight Saga was in some sort of way counterculture. But I couldn't really find the words for it, so my goal with this project was to, via conversations with girls who participate in hyperfeminine fashions, develop a better understanding of femininity as rebellion or resistance against femphobia. Hyperfeminine expressions can also be a reclamation of agency for women of color who have limited access to traditional girlhood and femininity compared to our white counterparts. According to the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, adultification is a form of bias where children from Black, Asian, and minoritized ethnic communities are perceived as being more streetwise, more grown up, less innocent, and less vulnerable than other children. Because of this phenomenon, girls of color aren't really afforded girlhood. Their bodies and behaviors are seen as adult much quicker, and dressing for oneself in an innocent and girly way can be therapeutic for girls who didn't get to do the same thing as a child. Dressing in a hyperfeminine way can be a reclamation and celebration of girlhood. Feminine expressions as well are becoming much more inclusive and diverse as time goes on, compared to early 2000s portrayals of femininity as being almost exclusively white and wave-like. So, in conclusion, hyperfemininity, although seen as useless, selfish, and dumb quite often, can be a subversive way for women and femmes to express themselves, reclaim agency, reclaim girlhood, take up space, etc. It's punk. Being girly as shit. It's punk. Let us live.